everyone says, Chris, you can't do all of these things. You have to pick one. And I've figured out systems that work for me to work on all of these projects somewhat simultaneously. My day is broken down into I'll work on this project for a few hours and then I'll switch to this project, but they all inform each other and they all get inspired by the other things that I'm doing.
Welcome to Vita Brevis, a podcast about business, art, life, and death. I'm your host, Carlos Cardenas. Here we explore how business, creativity, and philanthropy intersect through the lives of remarkable people. I talk with entrepreneurs and community leaders who are passionate collectors and visionary patrons to discover how art shapes their work, purpose, and legacy. Because life is short, but art is forever. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Vita Brevis. I am here today with my dear old friend, Chris Erck. How are you, Chris?
Doing great.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
When I first asked you to come on this podcast a few weeks ago, what did you think about the premise? Did any immediate thoughts come to you?
I love the premise because I think the longevity of art is the thing that surpasses us. It keeps going long after we're gone. It's how society is recorded. I think it tells about what's happening during every era of time. It really gives a sense of not only visually but economically, and it is the true record of the feelings of the times.
Couldn't agree more. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Oh gosh, how long is this?
As long as you
Um,
want.
yeah, I'm all over the place. I am passionate about ideas and concepts, and I figure out how to apply those into my daily life and my work and the things that the projects that I take on. Um, so I've done a little bit of everything. I'm kind of all over the place. I think there's a thread that connects it all, but I didn't start out saying I'm going to be a real estate developer. I'm going to be in the bar business. I'm going to be an art dealer. I'm going to be a collector. I didn't, you know, have this preconceived plan, and I've let it grow organically, and I've followed different paths, and then sometimes I pivot and switch to a different one. So it's a winding path, just following the journey and seeing where it takes me.
I love it. So obviously you've worn many hats. I know you've owned bars and restaurants. I know that you're actually launching a handmade boot brand.
Yep,
I know that you're an antiques entrepreneur, art collector, real estate developer. There's a lot, as you
there's a
just
lot.
mentioned. Yeah. So what thread sort of connects all of these ventures for you?
There's certainly an art component that weaves through all of them. As I've worked with artists, I've found that very engaging and very important. And it's something when I designed a bar, I'd bring in an artist that I wanted to work with to help me, with the interiors. I got into the bar business because I love branding. I come up with a name and I'm like, oh, I should open a business named on, based after that name that I came up with. Swig Martini Bar was the first bar that I opened on the Riverwalk in San Antonio. And the idea came, I was sitting on the beach in California having a glass of wine, and I turned to my wife and I said, "Do you want a swig?" And I said, "Oh, Swig, that's a really good brand. I should own a bar called Swig. If I ever open a bar, I'm going to do it." She said, "No, you're never opening a bar. That's not on the in the plan." And then 4 years later, a space came available, and I was working with a graphic designer, a different project, and we just had this incredible brainstorming session when I mentioned it to her as this is something I'm kind of thinking about. I got so excited. I was like, okay, I'm signing the lease. I'm going to do this. And that launched me into 20 plus years in the bar and restaurant business, building brands, some of them with multiple locations. So I think, and I incorporated artists into the design of those spaces. I brought in contemporary artists that I was working with at the time. I commissioned a filmmaker in Dallas, Nick Nicosia, to do a film that was played in the bar for 20 years, a black and white, wonderful film. When I started developing real estate, I worked with artists. I had an artist residency in my building. It was an old uniform factory. When I bought it, it was filled with buttons and zippers and thread and all the things from the factory sewing tables. And I invited artists to come in and use those materials to make art that I then exhibited through an open studio. Sometimes I took it to art fairs, all sorts of different things. But the influence of those artists made me look at things in a different way, made me look at the building in a different way. I mean, obviously, there is a business goal to make money in those businesses, but it wasn't the only goal. It was also to make a difference. And it was also to do something that maybe changed the way people think, maybe influenced how they look at their own lives. And by doing things that people walked in and said, wow, I've never seen anything like this in San Antonio. um, if I can affect someone else in that way, the money is great, but it's more about the journey, and the money is the byproduct.
Is there a single artwork or a moment that you can think of that was kind of the spark for all of the above?
Yes, I had a mentor who knew me from the time that I was 5 years old. He was an interior designer in South Texas. He worked for a lot of families in South Texas, but he did my parents' house in Alice, Texas, where I grew up. And his name was Norman Foster. Norman was friends with Louise Nevelson. So at a very early age, I started hearing that name, and my parents bought a small, very small work, small collage work by Louise Nevelson at his recommendation. And so I started being exposed to art, and I love the found object in everything that I do. Norman was a designer. Well, I'm going to back up. When my parents met him, he was a designer, but he was an artist who needed to make ends meet, and he took a job as an interior designer, and he built an incredible career. At age 50, he retired from interior design and went back to making art full time. But having that influence for me, learning about design, learning about living in spaces, learning about the juxtaposition of old and new and the balance and proportion of these things, that I could see through Louise Nevelson's work, through other artists that I was introduced to later on. All of those things influenced me. So finding something that has a history is something that permeates through everything that I've done. I'm not interested, even though I'm about to do a project that's from the ground up, I've never done a project from the ground up. I always find something, a house that has a history, and I completely remake it. An old farmhouse that was a dairy farm in Alamo Heights in San Antonio, I bought. It was dilapidated, kind of falling down. I loved the potential. And inside, I made it a contemporary showpiece and then filled it with, all sorts of found art and made art. I think that having Norman as an influence in my life charted that path to understand this everyday object, whether it's something simple from our everyday, or whether it's a house or an old factory. When I bought the Fine Silver building in San Antonio, I went to the city to start figuring out how to permit it. And they're like, that building doesn't meet code. You need to tear it down and build a new building that's up to code. I was like, no, it's a beautiful building. Why would anyone tear it down? It was at one time the largest employer in San Antonio, 122,000 square feet in a very prime and very prominent spot. But I see the potential in those things, and that's because of Norman showing me
Hmm.
to see the beauty in the mundane and the everyday objects and the things that a lot of people overlook.
You said Norman Foster. Obviously, this is not the Sir Norman
It
Foster we
it is
all
not
know.
the Sir Norman Foster. Yes.
Thank you for
Yes.
clarifying. I was going to be really impressed. I was like, I didn't know he had such a history in South Central Texas. Anyhow,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's great about architecture. There's something I've always thought about real estate development is that it's the business of architecture.
Yeah.
Like, there's an interesting way of looking at it, and it sort of bridges the design elements with, the really high economic stakes in construction, right? Tell us
Yep.
more about what
Yep.
what you're brewing, right now. What's the ground up development you're working on?
So I bought in 2013, I bought a building on the river in San Antonio near the Pearl development. It's got 200 feet of river frontage, and it was originally the plan was to make it into a residence convert. There's a really interesting metal barn structure on the property that's about 6,000 square feet, and it's a was built in 1948. It was the precursor to what's now a Butler building or a prefab building, but this is architecturally very interesting. It has arched supports, and it's the way it's bolted together is very different from what you would find today. So we were going to peel out sections of the roof and create these interior courtyards and glass walls inside. So it kind of was this wonderful structure that kind of enclosed on itself. That project went away a while back, and I'm developing the property now. I'm going to relocate that existing interesting building. There's another building on it that we'll just tear down, but that existing building I will relocate and rebuild in a different place to have a different life. But and of course, it will be more expensive to take it down and move it and rebuild it than it would be to just go buy a Butler building. But the beauty of this building is really interesting, and I think it's too good to be demolished and destroyed. The project itself will be a 12-story condo building adjacent to all of the Pearl complex where they have all the restaurants, the Hotel Emma, everything that's happening there. It is the kind of the epicenter of what's happening in San Antonio right now, and it's driving as a catalyst everything around it. It's caused more growth downtown. It's caused growth everywhere. It's been a huge attraction to draw people to San Antonio. So there's nothing I realize that there's not a big residential to buy component near Pearl. That's something that's missing. There are currently 3,000 apartments within a mile radius of Pearl. And in 2 years, that will double. It'll be 6,000 apartments. There are a few townhomes. There are probably 40 townhomes in that mile radius, and very few residential. The residential houses that are in the neighborhood have all been snatched up, bulldozed. They're now apartment buildings. They're, commercial buildings. All of that is being gentrified and changed, and we're getting all this density, but there's nothing to buy. So my project will be a high-end condo project that will be, again, I seek out young talent. So I have this amazing architect that you introduced me to, Charles Beckendorf, who's doing the project. And when I heard about him and heard about his history, he's from San Antonio. He understands the history of San Antonio. Being able to have he's worked in New York. I'm going to jump back. He's worked in New York. He's got this incredible resume. The projects he's worked on are some of my favorite projects that I've seen. So he relocated back to Texas, but he gets it. We have a very similar aesthetic style. He understands what I want to do to kind of push the envelope in San Antonio and do something that's a little bit different that people haven't seen before, that is a uniquely architectural for the city of San Antonio, but pays respect to the missions, the courthouses, the things that make San Antonio culture what it is. And because he had that upbringing in San Antonio and understands that, I think he's the perfect person to do it. And this will be a great project for him as well. He's early in his career. He just started his own practice. So I love the idea of collaborating with someone like that who is I can help affect his career, but he's gonna do wonderful things down the line, whether he works with me or not. I mean, we're obviously planning to work together, but, I think he's immensely talented, and I'm super excited to see what we can put together on the river in San Antonio. I
Tell us more about the boot brand that you're making and some of the other projects that are, getting a little bit
Sure.
outside of, the real estate space.
Sure. So the boots are It's a shorter boot. I designed it out of necessity during the pandemic. I met someone a while back who put this in perspective for me, and she used this quote that something that's what you're collecting in antiques, art, whatever, people are drawn to different things for different reasons. And she said, "Oh, well, that's part of your own personal recipe." And I'd never heard it put that way before, but there's something in your life that happened. Maybe your parents collected something, maybe there's something, but there's this influence that you are drawn to this Asian screen because your parents had these Asian screens, or you're drawn to this kind of plate because your grandmother collected these plates. So there are these things that are familiar to you that draw you into it. And that brings me to the boots. So I grew up in Alice, then San Antonio, and then my parents had a ranch in the hill country on the Llano River. And I would ride around on a four-wheeler in a swimsuit and boots, and I'd kick off my boots, jump in the river, swim a while, and then get back on my four-wheeler and put the boots back on and keep going. So those were Red Wing Pecos boots. I always hated wearing boots. You need them functionally, but I didn't enjoy wearing them because I have a larger calf muscle and they would chafe my leg and they would be uncomfortable and my pant leg would be it was a mess. So I didn't wear boots a lot. And then I started doing a little research and found out in the 40s boots were shorter. In the 50s, and they were comfortable and they were functional, easy to get on and off. In the 50s, rodeo was the entertainment, and the cowboy before TV was big, cowboys said, "I want people to know that's me down in the arena. Make my boots taller, put flames on them, put flowers on them," and it became a style. And the boot makers realized, "Hey, we can charge more money for taller boots." So, um, they relegated the shorter boots that they used to make to the back of the store and changed the name and started calling them Pee-wees. It was a brilliant reverse marketing scheme, so they could sell the more expensive, taller boots, and that became the trend, and boots became taller. So I wanted to go back to the time when boots were shorter, more comfortable, easy to get on and off. And then I added the first version is a Frankenstein version. Yeah, I took a Red Wing Pecos boot and I cut them down to 7.5 inches tall, which is, I think, the perfect height. And then I put a red Vibram sole on them. Vibram doesn't make many colored lug soles, so I had to add midsoles to get the thickness I want. And so it's kind of this hybrid, but I end up with this almost athletic hiking boot looking sole on the bottom of this simple brown boot. It's just, I'm not reinventing a boot shape or a boot genre, but these boots are so comfortable to wear, so easy to get on and off, and they just have this style. And I'm calling the company Cortado, but which means cut or short. And I'm hopeful that that will become a trend of wearing a shorter boot again, and people don't have to walk into a boot store and say, "Hey, show me your peewees." So I originally, because I spent a lot of time out in West Texas and Marfa, I originally wanted to use Marfa boot as the brand of the boot. And I call them West Texas high tops. And I just think it's for me, it was a perfect intersection of contemporary art, a more contemporary style, and a traditional boot. But there are all sorts of trademark issues with using the name Marfa. And so that's still an ongoing process on all the trademark stuff, but it got me to a new name, which is Cortado, which I love even better.
Isn't there a furniture brand you're also working on as well?
Yes, and for years, again, I haven't figured out the brand of the furniture brand, but I've made furniture for years. I've designed desks and beds and all sorts of things. I wanted to be an architect and ended up in commercial real estate, but I would always still design my own spaces. And that's why I wanted to do the bars, because I wanted to design the space. As much as I love the branding, I love the design of the space. So I often had to build things that I couldn't find when I had a vision of, I want the tables to look like this. So I had them fabricated out of terrazzo and then a custom steel base. And I realized recently that I have this long line of things that I've designed, industrial furniture, and I'm making some tables, a dining room table and things. But I realized that I could take these things that I may have designed 25 years ago and create a line of products that I can get out into the world. And I have a venue to do that in Round Top, Texas. So I may launch some of these there. Or I may work with some stores. I'm doing a table that is made, the legs are made from car transmissions. So very industrial, but then the top is this elegant oval shape that kind of contrasts the harsh industrial transmission legs. And that top can be steel, it can be wood, it can be all sorts of different things. Walnut's my favorite wood, and I'll refinish that. Or I have a guy in Austin that I love to work with that puts in patches and bow ties and leaves the elegance. The cracks are still in the wood, but they're stabilized and done. I mean, he's a woodworker, but he's an incredible artist. All of these, things that he's done for me. We're doing a huge headboard that's 11 feet long. That's one slab of maple that's just gorgeous. And it's a funky slab that no one could use for anything else, but as a headboard, I think it's going to be really elegant and wonderful.
What's the venue in Round Top you're talking about?
So I have a space. It's Round Top Auction. It's a 7,000 foot warehouse. It's the largest freestanding building in Round Top, and I leased the space and decided that I've been buying things in Round Top for 35 years and have warehouses filled with things that I couldn't live without but don't live with. And so I decided, okay, the wagon's getting a little bit hard to pull. So I'm going to open a venue in Round Top, the thing that's missing. There are thousands of dealers that come there. You can buy anything you ever wanted, anything you never knew you needed, you can find in Round Top. And it's twice a year. Round Top is becoming much more year round. And the thing that I realized was missing is an auction component. During the pandemic, auctions became a big thing. And there are a lot of people who say, "Oh, I've wanted to go to Round Top, but I've never been. How can I see what's there?" And I was like, "Okay, here's an opportunity." So the domain was available. It hadn't been available, then it lapsed, and I picked it up. So once I got the domain, roundtopauction.com, I said, "Okay, time to start a new adventure." So the venue is filled with things that are on consignment, things that are for auction, but also a lot of things that are for sale. I've incorporated, having been an art dealer in the past, there are a lot of artists that I work with and love to continue to work with. I'm always finding new artists that I want to show. And so the space right now is a combination of all of that. It's contemporary artists, it's some traditional artists, it's some found art, it's some found paintings, it's the auction items, it's the furniture, it's just this really wonderful amalgamation of all these different things coming together. And it's very eclectic, but very much my style of blending contemporary and crafted and old and new. So all in one spot.
So, Chris, tell me what other ventures you're excited about right now.
I think the one that is kind of coming to the forefront now, it's been years in culmination, but the one that's really kind of popping up is a project I have, landing.com. It happened interestingly for a reason. When I was in the bar and restaurant business, jazz club on the Riverwalk in San Antonio called The Landing. It was a bar that had been there for 30 years and it was in decline. And the owner had it as a lifestyle business and he wanted to make a trend. I bought the business, tried to make it work as a jazz club. The brand was too far gone. And while there was an audience for it, it was not the audience that we needed in the bar concept called The Worm, which was a tequila bar, gal bar. That was in 2012 on the Riverwalk in San Antonio. But when I bought the Landing, they had previously registered the domain landing.com in like 92 or 93. So that came with this. And after I switched away from the Landing concept, hold on to that domain. And I think there's potential because it is what it is. It's a site for landing pages. And as time has gone on, I see this simplification in the market. Websites were huge and everyone's building these huge, very complex websites. And I see a return to simplicity. So I've launched a company under Landing. Nobody needs a website. Everybody needs a landing. I see it as a glorified online business card or just a simple site for people that need to be found. So for artists, for entrepreneurs, people starting a business, people in real estate, restaurants who just need to get their hours and their menu out there. Websites are so complex, but there's no place to just go and find a simple menu. We can be that service. So that's the value proposition. We have templates. You can go in and select something and plug and play, put your picture, put your text, put your phone number, whatever you want on there, have all your links together in one spot. So it linked to your Instagram, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, all of those things that you need to be found for people to see your Shopify account. We're not reinventing the wheel, but what we're doing is already out there. Other people provide this service, but we've got straightforward, easy access where you can have your own site online, 5 minutes, your $dollars a month. It's super easy to update, but it's a way that you can easily be found. I think it fits with the other things that I'm doing because it's something that will really help starting businesses. It's for people who are starting out, whether they're an entrepreneur, needs to get found and have some kind of exposure.
How far along are you in the development?
We'll be launching in a few weeks, actually. We'll be launching in January. So the development has been in progress for a long time. Again, it goes back to I love a brand and figuring out how to build a business around a brand concept. And it was hard to get people on board with. I don't think you have to make something new. You just have to make it simpler, better, user friendly. I mean, Apple didn't invent most of the products that they're and they perfected it and they made it user friendly. And that's what I think this is. And we've had multiple offers of people trying to buy the domain from us. And the people that I have helping me with the coding, the one person I have helping me with the coding says, maybe you should just sell it, take the money, and we'll come up with another brand. And I'm like, no, this is the brand. This is the value, is the actual brand, because it is what it is. And we're not even advertising yet. We've got 500 unique users a day going to our site.
So going back to all of the different business models that you employ, it seems like there's almost too many to list right now. It's really, really amazing. Is there one that you find to be something of a favorite, something that's more efficient? I mean, because between, real estate development, the auction business model, the furniture brand, the boots, or even a restaurant, which has notoriously thin margins, but bars have better margins. Tell us a little bit about your sort of business philosophy in terms of navigating these different business models.
So they're all different and unique. And everyone says, Chris, you can't do all of these things. You have to pick one. But I have found that I'm definitely some sort of neurodivergent. I've tested for ADD and I'm not ADD or ADHD. The test says I'm not, but there's something there. And I've figured out systems that work for me to work on all of these projects somewhat simultaneously. There's some that I can prioritize and spend more time on at a given time, but I think that a lot of them inform each other, and I'll work on one of the projects for a little while. My day is broken down into I'll work on this project for a few hours, and then I'll switch to this project, but they all inform each other, and they all get inspired by the other things that I'm doing. Some of them, deadlines start creeping up and things start happening that one bubbles to the top and says, okay, this is close to launch, or this one needs more attention right now. And so I'll pivot and focus on that. They don't move at the same speed, but they all keep moving forward, and then bringing in people that can help me in these projects. I have a couple of consultants that kind of help keep me on track to make sure that I'm prioritizing the right things and remembering, which things are happening with each business. These are the deadlines that we need to meet. These are the things that are happening that are relevant right now.
Do you
So,
have equity partners or JVs? Obviously, you have outside consultants and you have obviously some
sure.
sort of help, but on the principal side, I get the impression you tend to be pretty solo.
I'm pretty autonomous in all of this. I've worked with some investors in projects a few times, and it's good when it's someone that's a friend who I know really well and they understand kind of how I work, but it can be challenging also. So I tend to go solo. I'm definitely going to go out and raise some money through lending. I'm going to borrow money on the condo project in San Antonio. I will take on an equity partner if the structure is right, but I'm looking at it from a more of a lending standpoint. And most of the other stuff I've just been self-funding, which often makes it a little slower sometimes. Some are cash flow intensive, some, I have to pick my favorites at the time and say, okay, well, this one needs more funding, or I need to hire a strategic person to do this. So it jumps around, but when they're going and everything's churning and the cash flow is great, it's great. When that stops, when things change, it can get challenging at times and you have to make different decisions. So I've worked with lenders on projects, I've worked with investors on projects, but most of the time I'm still working solo.
Do you think your interest in art makes you a better business person?
I don't know that it makes me a better business person, but it makes me think differently. I go to all the domestic art fairs, all the big fairs, some of the small fairs. I'm trying to get back on the circuit of some of the international ones, but the art fairs are inspiring. And I have business connections that I build through visiting those fairs. So there's a networking component, but I mostly go to the fairs for inspiration. And I'll see something at an art fair that inspires me. I'm like, oh, that makes me think about this. And I can do that with Cortado Boot. And maybe it's an artist's video that I see and it inspires me in a certain way. And then I think, okay, I want to collaborate with that artist on a design on the boot, some things like that. So I think it informs me. I think I've had a really good track record of finding artists early. So from the business of art, I've discovered artists earlier in their career, and then I've done what I can to help them build their career. Not just buying the work, but doing something through inviting them to participate in my residency program or helping them source materials or helping them with the resources that they need to do something with their art.
Tell me about the art you collect and how this relates to your businesses.
So going back to what I said earlier about Louise Nevelson and found objects and that sort of thing, that is kind of the starting point for me. I love found object sculpture. I love everyday materials. What I collect is not those things, but also non-traditional painting. So there are very few pieces in the collection that are just painterly. It's an artist who is a painter and they paint with acrylic or oil or whatever. There are few pieces, but for the most part, I love pattern and repetition. I'm a sucker for a grid. So an artist that uses found objects and puts it in some sort of a grid is great. Mark Bradford is a great example of that. He takes end papers. He was a former hairdresser. He uses end papers, scorches the edges of them. End papers are used when you get a perm. He scorches the edges of them and collaged them onto canvas using blonde hair color. So there are these very Agnes Martin looking paintings per se, but they were made with found materials. And he's a great example of someone that I found early. I bought the first piece he ever sold and gave him his first show back in 2002. And his career has taken off, not because of me, but I helped him when he, was trying to figure out his way. And he said, I think I want to use billboard material. My friend happens to be in that business. So I said, how can we get some of the materials for that for your work? So there are things like that where I come across an artist that I want to help their career. And when Leonardo Drew was my first artist in residency in my residency program, I had all the things from the fine silver uniform factory, buttons, zippers, threads, that I invited him to come take and use and incorporate into his work. And most of that work ended up in museums. First pieces went to the Hirshhorn in DC, and then Cornelia Parker and Terry Adkins and a number of artists who could appreciate those found objects. I used to make sculptures myself many years ago, and I decided that shifted at some point. Instead of making sculptures out of found objects, I started making buildings and houses and bars and restaurants. And that was my creative outlet. And so my sculptures, my buildings, my bars, all of those things evolved as this time progression of materials and history. So I think it all makes sense to me. When I started collecting, I didn't realize a lot of people say you need to have a theme, you need to have a plan. This is what I collect. I didn't do that. Those themes emerged after a while. I kind of figured out a formula for buying art and investing in art, and I've made more money probably in the art world through things that I bought early and then later sold. It's really hard to let go of them sometimes, but value-wise, the art market has gone up significantly, and I think that following a young artist from that start and helping them when you can have an effect on building their career, that's fantastic to support those artists. But for me, these mundane objects, the pattern and repetition, all of those things are things that I'm really find very engaging. Of course, I'm trying to add structure. The grid adds some sort of a structure to the artwork that I like, that pattern and repetition, which is something I seek in my life, to find that I have all these things, this chaos that I'm trying to make sense of, and putting it in that framework makes a lot of sense to me. When I was in Miami for the Miami Basel Art Fair, I found an artist that I didn't know of before. His name is Hiroshi, Japanese artist, very successful in Japan, has had some exposure in the US, but he had this huge piece that was 10 feet square made out of Japanese denim jeans, used jeans with holes in them, and he put them together in a way that just spoke to me. So it was just this huge painting made of denim that I just absolutely love. No paint on it. It's all sewn together and this incredible thing. So that's the sort of thing that I get really excited about. And it's discovery for me. Finding those artists that put everyday items together in a way that I hadn't seen before. That's always inspiring to me. And I think that's where it translates into the businesses that I do, connecting dots and connecting things in a different way that makes a new order, a way of looking at things differently and creating something new out of things that are often overlooked in the everyday.
What do you hope your cultural footprint will be here in Central Texas or beyond? What do you hope your legacy to be in the space?
Oh, such an interesting question. I think if I can affect future generations to look at things differently as far as incorporating art into the things that they look at, living with it or looking at it or collecting it or supporting an artist or incorporating an artist into something that you're doing. Obviously, more for people that are in an entrepreneurial space, but work with artists, think differently. I think the project in Marfa is really exciting. I think the culmination of the things that I've been doing in the business world and incorporating that into this space in Marfa will be really important. I wanted to work with artists. I was on nonprofits. I realized that I didn't want to just raise money for a nonprofit. I wanted to work directly with artists in the way that I could, impact their lives. So I said, okay, I'm going to open a gallery. So I opened the gallery and the residency program at the same time in San Antonio at the Fine Silver Building. And I still have some of the materials from the uniform factory and patterns and things like that artists can continue to use moving forward. But I never loved selling art. I love giving someone the exposure to art. I love giving them the information they need to make the financial decision to buy a piece of art that they already love. But I'm not a dealer. I never thought of myself, this is my career. I'm an art dealer. It was a necessity for a while, but the thing that was the most rewarding was the residency program. And when I could work with those artists and do things that affect their career and get exposure for them, and then bring in museum curators to see the work as it's being created and as it's being completed, and placing that work in museums. That was the most rewarding for me. So I sold the building in San Antonio in 2011, and I wanted to find a property, and many years later, I rediscovered Marfa and went out there, and I was on this mission to find the right property out there. I didn't want a residential property. There are limited commercial properties, and I finally found what used to be an old car dealership, built in 1920. Just 2,000 square feet open space, and I walked in, I was like, "Okay, this is it. This can be a showroom for artwork, it can be a residence, and I can build other structures and recreate the residence I had in San Antonio." If I told someone, "Oh, I have a residency in San Antonio," they're like, "Oh, that's nice." If I say I have a residency in Marfa, every artist is asking the next question. How do I get in? How do I apply? I want to go to Marfa. There's this unique energy from Marfa that draws people there. It's inspiring. And I think that I can have a bigger impact in a smaller town than I can in a bigger town. So I've been talking to a number of artists to come out there. The project is under construction now. I haven't started the residency, but it will start sometime in 26. And I find materials that are inspiring to me, and then I find the artist to work with it. I found at the Rose Bowl flea market, I found last summer some wallpaper patterns that were really interesting and unique to me, and they were unlike any I had ever seen, and I talked to the dealer who had them. He told me the story that they were hand carved by slaves in the 1830s on a plantation in Louisiana. An antique dealer bought them in 1959 and shipped them to his building in Bakersfield, where they sat in the basement of his building until he died about 2 years ago. I was told that the Smithsonian had found out about them and wanted to acquire them for the museum because they were slave history, they were art history, they were design history, they were craft history, they were American history. There are all these things that they were the culmination of, and this part of this trend of these wallpapers that were produced in the early 1800s, pre-Civil War. And this dealer was selling them for $60 to $100 a piece, and he had, I don't know, probably 60 of them left. And I said, "These can't be broken up. They need to stay together. Can I buy all of them for you?" And he was like, "Yeah, I don't want to haul them home." So he gave me a really, really good deal, like $4 a piece for them, so that he didn't have to take them home. I was like, "Do you have more of these?" And he said, "Yeah, I have thousands of them. They're in my warehouse in Sweetwater." And we worked out a deal and I bought them. So I have, I don't know, 1,000, 1,500 of these wallpaper patterns. And I brought them to Texas. I hauled them here, and I have them to take to Marfa. And I'm looking for the right artist to come in and do something with them, something important with them that references their history, but also brings them into contemporary culture and contemporary art. So I find things like that. So I stockpile materials. When Alamo Iron Works shut down in San Antonio to build the Alamo Dome, they sold off all their old casting foundry patterns. And so few people showed up at the auction that they sold them not by the pallet, but by the rows of pallets. And I didn't buy them at the time, but after the auction, I tracked most of them down. And I'd say I ended up with probably 70% of the foundry patterns that came out of Alamo Iron Works. That was 30 years ago. I've given them to artists. I've made my own sculptures with them. I've done all sorts of things, and I have piles of them to work with artists to find the right artists and connect the artist and the material and help them create something, the next step.
Chris, this is absolutely inspiring. It's just amazing the sort of depth and breadth of all of your cultural entrepreneurship initiatives. What would you give as advice to a young entrepreneur that is interested in aesthetics, history, culture, etc.?
learn all you can and surround yourself with people that inspire you. I mean, that's the thing that I've really found. I seek out mentors and mentees. I love to mentor people and as they're starting their careers, and I connect with people who are in their 20s. The people who are in their 20s haven't become jaded. They can still take on the world and change the world, and I want to encourage that. The scientists who put astronauts on the moon were they're all in their 20s, who came up with the everything about it. That's inspiring to me. It goes back to these ideas. Find a mentor, find someone that you can meet with on a pretty regular basis and just talk about things. They say that you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. Find those people. Find who are those people that inspire you and keep you growing and never stop learning. That's the thing. I learn so much every day, whether it's on the internet or on Instagram. A lot of people say stay off of social media. I find so much value in things on Instagram and so much inspiration, whether it's artists or philosophy or human nature. I mean, I've learned so much about who I am as a person, grown through that and about this journey that we're all on. And, I think the most important thing my friend told me this quote, and I think about it all the time, and I tell everyone this: the journey is the prize. Enjoy every step of the way, even the hard stuff, but let it flow through you and keep moving forward. Don't stop. And that's to me very inspiring. And I love every step of this journey that I'm on.
I love it, Chris. I think that's the perfect place to stop. Thank you so much for your time, Chris.
Thank you. This has been really fun.